Welcome to Built for This. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. My podcast features captivating conversations with intriguing people who have found purpose in their lives through their career, family, or life experiences, and just why they were built for this. Through the stories that you will hear, I trust that you will be inspired and encouraged to find just what you were built for. So let's get started. And welcome again to another episode of Built for This. And a great privilege today and an honor and a treat for me to go back to my radio broadcast days of way back in the 1980s. I have a guest on with me today who's a longtime revered public relations specialist. You'll know him with the Dallas Cowboys and then a long time with the National Football League. But Greg Aiello joining me on today's show. And Greg, thanks very much for jumping in.
Thanks for inviting me, Brian. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, when I broke into radio, I was just a young kid in my 20s in Dallas, working at KRLD radio with the great Frank Gleber and Brad Sham at that time. And at that time, as you know, you were with the Cowboys, so this was 1981 for me. We were the flagship station and carrying the Cowboys. So that's how I got to know you with the Cowboys. And I do want to talk a lot about your experience there. You got to see a lot of that and what you bring to the table for maybe aspiring communications people. But that's not where you started. You actually started on the other side of the fence, Newsday and United Press International. Was that your first goal out? Was to be a writer, to be a journalist, and go that route?
Yeah, I was on that path, Brian, and I'd say it started in elementary school when I was branded by a teacher, I guess, as, "Oh, you're a good writer." Oh, okay, well that sounds good, and so that was certainly an impetus and a spark for doing something with that. And then, so when you're in school, especially back then, in the 60s, 70s, 60s actually, then, okay, if you're a writer, what do you write for the school paper? And we had a good school paper, and so what am I going to write? Well, I love sports, and so I guess I'll write sports. So I was on that path, and I went to Notre Dame, and they had a newspaper and a magazine which I contributed to, and I definitely was heading in that direction. And when I got out of Notre Dame, I actually went to Columbia School of Journalism, and so I was definitely on that path. That was a lot of fun. It was a great year, and after that, I started working for first a weekly paper on Long Island. And then I got on the Newsday sports staff as a part-timer, covering high schools and local stuff. Yeah. And then UPI was my first full-time job in the business. So I was doing that in the mid-70s on the UPI National Sports Desk in New York. And after my first year, a fellow you know well named Rick Goslin, who was covering the Giants and the NFL for us, he left and went to Kansas City and went on to superstardom in our industry. Yeah. And they assigned me to the New York Giants beat, which meant I covered Giants home games and I went to playoffs and Super Bowls. That was my first exposure, other than as a fan, to the National Football League. And I was very impressed with how they ran things, and the public relations aspect was so well done and was considered the gold standard. And a lot of the PR people were former journalists. So it sparked a thought, which I never had before. I never aspired to be in public relations. It was writing and journalism and sports that were my passion, so to speak. And so, but then one day after, it was in early 79, I called a fellow I knew a little bit in the league office named Frank Connors. And I said, hey, I might be interested someday working in the NFL somewhere. If you ever hear of anything, let me know. Okay, well, 99 out of 100 times, that's going to lead to nothing. Right. And but he said, well, the guy in Dallas on the PR staff, a fellow named George Heddleston, left to take the 49ers job. You might call Doug Todd down there. Okay. So I wound up getting the job for, I don't know what reasons exactly. Well, I know some of the reasons. Doug Todd was the guy who hired me,
Yeah.
and his background was journalism in Oklahoma City, like mine. He was looking for, he wanted to hire someone from out of town so as not to alienate whoever in town was looking for that job, and also to uh, use the, not excuse, but the rationale like we're a national team, and we're a big deal, and someone with national perspective and context might be a good thing. So, and he talked to the Giants PR director, said some nice things about me apparently, and he offered me the job. So
Well,
all of a sudden I had to decide, oh wow, this is big change. Should I do this or not? And a fellow, an editor at Newsday who I knew real well said, well, if you're not sure you want to do this journalism thing, if you're not sure, then maybe you should try that.
mhm.
And that had an impact on me. So I did. And like you, I was a young guy in my 20s when I showed up in Dallas in 1979. By the way, when Doug Todd uh, interviewed me, he said, meet me in Philadelphia because I have to go to NFL Films and work on our highlight film.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So I met him in Philadelphia, and that was the film that he named America's Team.
Oh, wow.
So my first year down there was when that thing took off, which was a lot of fun. So I think the point is, there's certain in these career decisions, you're never quite sure what to do, but some of it's luck. You got to be in the right place at the right time, but you have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And you have to take chances. And, the fact that I called that guy in the league office, even though I figured, well, it's probably amount to nothing. And it led to something that was, unbelievable for me.
Yeah. And so along that lines, Greg, and I think it kind of parallels kind of a decision that I had to make when I was at KRLD and you were with the Cowboys at that time. So this was around 1988. I had been, I was broadcasting, and I thought I'd do that for the rest of my life. But I had an opportunity to jump over to the public relations side, go to SMU. That started a long athletic PR career for me. So when you made that decision, and the people that were around you were saying, be sure, or if you're unsure of the journalism route and you want to go, then pursue your dreams. So how hard was that for you, or did you hesitate at all? And then once you got into that, you already mentioned several names of people who had a journalism background and have made the move over to public relations. The difficult decision, but was your background turned out to be a huge asset for you because you already had that connection to the media side?
Yeah, for sure. In my case, it was a difficult decision because I had leaving New York to go to Dallas, where I didn't really know anyone and all that. And but the fact that it was the Dallas Cowboys that were offering me an opportunity, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
If it's been some lower level or just, maybe I wouldn't have done it, but that was hard to turn down. I mean, I had some friends locally that when they heard I had an offer to go work for the Dallas Cowboys, I said, oh my God, wow, you got to do that. I said, yeah, I guess so. But it was, it was kind of a career change in some respects. And but I was lucky to go to work with people like Doug Todd and have Tech Schramm as a mentor was enormously beneficial. And he same thing. His background was journalism, public relations, and then became the legendary general manager and it's in the Hall of Fame.
So talk a little bit about that. Like you said, when it's the Dallas Cowboys coming, making the call for you to go to that next level. Talk about what that was like. And here's a franchise steeped in tradition and history, coming off the 70s, Roger Staubach and all the Super Bowl runs during that time. What was that like stepping into the building? And as you just mentioned, working around and with people like Tex Schramm and then Tom Landry as the head coach.
Tom Landry,
Yeah,
Bill Brandt.
Gil Brandt, and a legendary, for 30 years, the backbone of the franchise, and then working, directly with and for a guy, Doug Todd, in the communications side. So your first take walking into the building in that job.
Well, I was starstruck. It turned out to be Roger Staubach's last season,
Right.
1979, which was and it was just so exciting because now you're part of the team. You're not on the field, but you're still part of the team. And in those days, the organization was so small compared to what they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're emotionally invested and you're living and dying with every game. And that was a lot. That was exciting, especially when you're winning. Now, 10 years later, I got to experience the dreadfulness of being with a losing team.
Yeah.
But that's another story. But it was, it was really fantastic. So what I had to do was be careful going in as a new guy, and then because I was learning, I didn't know anything about their business, and so you had to have people skills to be able to get along with people and pay attention and learn
Mm-hmm.
and feel your way through. And that's what I did. It was a fantastic year that ended with one of the greatest games ever with didn't end that way. It ended the regular season ended with that 35-34 Cowboys over the Redskins
Yep.
at home, comeback, Staubach. I mean, it was incredible. But then we lost in the playoffs. I missed all the Super Bowls. Maybe it was me.
Right. You got
But it was a team. They were coming off two straight Super Bowls that
Yeah.
they were in, 5 in the 70s, and I showed up at the end of all 5 of those.
Yeah.
And so it was great. And then we end that season was when America's team thing took off because of the highlight film, which we laid off on NFL Films. Well, NFL Films did that. Well, not really.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be approved by the Cowboys. And it was really it was Bob Ryan at NFL Films who had the concept of the Cowboys being this national team. So we have all this video on the road of all these Cowboy fans and they had just lost the Super Bowl, and I think the initial discussion was about, well, Cowboys die hard or something like that, and Doug said, well, we don't want to talk about us dying, and well, we have this national thing, and then Doug, who was very clever, turned the phrase America's team and slapped it on there, and it took off. So I spent a good deal of time that year promoting that idea. And it picked up steam, and a lot of people wrote about it because it had credibility. There was definitely something to that.
Yeah, and so a little bit more on America's team. You're right. It comes out. Doug Todd, the communications guru there with the Cowboys for so long, comes up with that term. It sticks. NFL Films, it becomes just huge over the next, well, it still is, the replays of it all. What was that like now going forward from that point when all of a sudden now here's this team that it's branded America's team? Everywhere you go as a PR person, the requests that you're getting for players or just kind of pushing that narrative of America's team. What was that like for you?
Well, it was a matter of being armed with facts. I mean, we had facts of TV ratings, and the Cowboys dominated because we're on so many nationally televised games.
Yeah,
there were a lot of reasons for that. It was an attractive team that did well on television, and then we had the merchandise sales when we had numbers on that, and it showed that we had these fans, an enormous amount of a national team like Notre Dame in football,
mm-hmm.
the Yankees in baseball, and it was, it was written about because it had credibility. There was definitely something to it. It was also controversial.
Yeah,
other teams didn't like it. Our players didn't really like it because it put a target on their back, and but it was what it was, and it was. It lasted for a long time.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it's still there. And if the Cowboys get back in the Super Bowl someday, then we'll hear it. You'll hear it again.
I want to talk about, or you talk about a couple of the players that were there during your time, and you mentioned Roger Staubach, his last season when you
Mhm.
arrive. And you at the top of this episode, you're talking about how you get emotionally involved in a team,
Yeah.
and first from a fan, but then you're working there, but you can't really disconnect that way. But what was it like being around someone like him, his last season, and then of course he had that very emotional press conference announcing his retirement? What was that season like for you?
Yeah, that was the season was great. And won the division on the last day with this
Yeah,
miraculous comeback, and he was the hero. And so it was like being around somebody that everybody admired. He was the real deal. He was just a great person on and off the field. And I growing up in the early '60s, I was a big fan of the Naval Academy,
yeah,
and so I knew of him and was a fan of him from back when he was in college.
yeah.
So it was a very exciting, and we became friends, and to this day we still are in contact here and there, and it was just it was super. His retirement, and this was that was something that he was only when you look at the players today, like Brady and Rogers only, I think he was 38, 37, 38,
Yeah.
but he had quite a few concussions
Yes.
in his career. And fortunately, he's still in good shape in his 80s.
Mhm.
But he was concerned about it. Anyone would be concerned about it. And he had a few that season. And so in the off season, I think Marianne, his wife, was concerned, and he went to see some doctors, and they couldn't, especially back then, they couldn't find anything wrong. Although one doctor told him, "You probably should retire. It's really not a good thing," which anybody could say that.
Yeah.
And that really, and so Roger decided to retire. But that was something that really upset Tex Strand, who loved Roger and didn't want him to retire.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, the guy's telling him he has no evidence anything's wrong. Why should he retire? Why is he telling him to retire?" But at any rate, he did. And we had that press conference, which was like the president of the United States resigning, and
Yes.
that was a huge thing. It was happened. I forget what day of the week, but it was midday, and
Yeah.
all the TV stations cut in and had this beautiful scene at Texas Stadium with the backdrop of the stadium behind them and the Stadium Club, and there was huge attendance of media, and I still have the tape recording of his retirement press conference where
Wow.
he broke down when he got emotional when he referred to the man on the funny hat.
Right. Well, let's talk about the man with the funny hat, and of course, talking about
Yeah,
Tom Landry, legendary Cowboys coach. You were obviously around him very closely, practice, training camp out in Thousand
yeah,
Oaks, games, and all that. But certainly one of the most innovative coaches ever in the game. But what was it like working as a
yeah.
PR person around him?
Well, he was a rock. He was the rock and that everyone leaned on, players and staff. He was just so you knew exactly what he was,
Hmm.
and he never wavered. And interesting thing to me was, well, two things. My first year was also uh, the season when he fired Thomas Henderson
Right.
in after a game in Pittsburgh where Thomas was fooling around on the sideline during a loss. He was trying to promote Preston Pearson's kerchief or something that he was selling or something,
Yeah.
and it really and you look back at that and say, well, really that was the reason he fired him,
Yeah. Nowadays.
and could you see what some of the things that goes on today. At any rate, Todd and I were at it was either Monday or Tuesday at Keller's on Northwest Highway, the hamburger place, the
Yes.
drive-in. I don't know if it's still there. Legendary place. So we were there having our hamburgers when someone from the one of the waiters or waitress came out and said, "Are you Mr. Todd?" there's a phone call for you. He went in, it was text, said, need to come back. Tom is getting rid of Henderson.
Wow.
And so we went back, and that was a big thing. In retrospect, I think if he had it to do over again, maybe would have taken a different approach. One thing is that he just wanted to release him, and Gil Brandt stepped in and said, "Well, wait a second, give me a chance to release him. Maybe we can get something for him."
Right.
And he wound up trading him, I think, to San Francisco and got a fourth round draft choice or something. But I think that really hurt the team because Henderson is volatile and crazy as he was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
He was a tremendous player, and our defense suffered for not having him there. Now, fortunately, he's been sober now for 30 years or something. I see him on Facebook, so
Yes.
really happy for Thomas. He was such a talented guy and a smart guy, but that was unfortunate. That impacted the team, and probably beyond 79. It probably hurt us in the early 80s too, when we could have had a stronger defense if he had been disciplined and played. So that was one thing I remember with the coach. But the other thing was, he was. This was at the end when he was let go, was fired by Jerry Jones. So, Tom was known as, stoic and never smiled and all that kind of thing, which he smiled, but
Right.
not not often during games or anything. But so he had this image of not being very emotional and all that kind of thing. And when he was let go before he was leaving and packing up, it unleashed this tremendous amount of emotion among the staff. It was an interesting thing because I think it was the fact that people relied on him. As I said, he was the rock and everything, and all of a sudden he's gone, and it unleashed that people were crying, and this is the guy who was considered unemotional and didn't smile and all that, but there was something about him that people loved, and so that was really difficult to see that, but it was an interesting thing to see. It showed the impact he had, beyond just the X's and O's, which he was brilliant at.
And I always thought that he was, even though, I mean, I was just this young reporter in my 20s, and here's this legendary head football coach, revered in the league for so long. I always thought his accessibility to the media, and maybe to really anyone, and you would be up close to him, that he would do a network interview just as easily as, or he would do an interview with a small town newspaper who's asked for access to him. He just seemed so genuinely accessible.
Yeah, I mean, he was gracious. Yeah, he understood that was part of the job. So he did every press conference, every post-game press conference, every press conference during the week that he had to do. He did them all, and we didn't have to argue with him or talk him into doing anything. It was just part of the job. And so he was remarkable. Either one quick story.
Yeah.
That is, I don't know, mid to late 80s. So we had to get for preseason telecast, we needed to find a new analyst. I forget what the change was, but at any rate, we decided on, this was Tex, of course.
Tex, yes.
George Allen, the former Redskins coach, who hated the Cowboys hated him.
Yeah.
So, and Tex thought this would be great. This is typical Tex.
Oh, yeah.
And so George was going to come. Coach Allen was going to come up from Los Angeles and go to training camp, practice at training camp. So I had the job of delivering the news to Coach Landry that George Allen is going to come up, be at practice. He's going to be doing the preseason telecast. And so it was after a morning practice, and I went up to him and I said it, I explained it to him, and all the coach said was, "George Allen?" And then just walked away. That was it. I was like, okay, I'm not happy about this, but I got other things to worry about.
Sure.
George Allen, yeah.
Well, what about Tex Ram? So
Yeah, he was.
ahead of his time, innovative. He knew network television. He knew the PR side, the media side.
Yeah,
Like you said, I think I don't know if the quote was right or not, or attributed to him, but it was like, no, something like, no matter what you say about the Cowboys, as long as you spell our name correctly, that's all I really
yeah,
care about him. He loved the attention, and any way he could get it, he seemed to be ready to do that.
absolutely. Yeah, he had a genius for uh, promotion and understanding what it took. And so he was, talk about accessible, but he was always available and
Yeah.
loved talking to the press, even though he'd get off at them. But he was, you talk about how to effectively get your message out. Well, he did it by being dominant, by being out there all the time. It's, we see it with, no matter what you think of him, Donald Trump dominates the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
He's constantly creating stories, and he dominates the conversation. Well, Tex did that.
Yeah.
He did it in different ways. From playing on Thanksgiving. Oh, you want some? It seems a lot of teams didn't want to play on Thanksgiving. Tex told Rozelle, "We'll play on Thanksgiving, but only if we can do it every year." And that's how that started.
Yeah.
And it's still going. And so another time during the '87 strike, there were players out picketing in front of Valley Ranch, in front of our entrance out on the road.
Yeah.
Tex went out there to engage them in conversation with the media and the cameras there. He didn't care. You want to talk? Let's talk. He was just so good at that, and learned a lot from that. And Jerry Jones, he told me he said I went to school on Tex.
Mm-hmm.
So Jerry Jones learned that from Tex in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and has picked up the mantle and has done the same thing. Jerry dominates the conversation, dominates the narrative, creates the stories, gets upset but keeps coming back.
Yep.
And so that was something I learned from Tex, and also just the attention to detail. Tex was had his finger on everything and wanted everything to be good or great, dare to be great. To the point where one time he looked at the flip cards that we would distribute to the press with the rosters and all that, and it struck him that a lot of the weight of each of our players seemed to be rounded off. It was too much 250,
Oh yeah.
190, so these look all rounded off. We need the exact weight, so we had to go back to the trainers and either gave us exact weights or we just changed 225 to 227 to make Tex happy. But it was, the point was to pay attention to detail, whether it was the uniforms, what was happening at the stadium regarding the fans, to communicating with the media, getting the stories out that we wanted to get out, the messages. He was terrific at that.
And for you, Greg, like you said, when you joined the team, so this is '79, you're getting introduced to the league from the media side and getting your, I guess, feet wet at the NFL level, but working around Tom Landry, Tex Schramm, and Gil Brandt, who revolutionized the draft and scouting and everything that was involved there. Those three men. And you getting a chance, so personally and professionally, how did all of that change you, affect you in your growth professionally to what then soon would be your chance to go to the NFL office?
Well, hopefully it made me better, and I learned a few things. I like to think that I did. As you're going through it, you're sort of taking it for granted. They're there every day, and you're just trying to do your job, but you're absorbing things and you're learning. And so I was well equipped to join the league office, but I had no aspirations to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's what happened was, so Jerry buys the team. By the way, an interesting thing about, a lot of people forget.
Yeah.
We all tried to, everyone, one of the things that worked for the Cowboys, everyone stayed in their lane, whether it's the coach, Tex, Tom, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Clint Murkison
ownership
stayed out. He let the people run. And it was, it was great when it 20 straight winning seasons, 5 Super Bowls, all that. Well, when it started going south, then there was some conflict and things started happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's the old thing that John Madden used to say: winning is the best deodorant; it covers up all the smells. Well, when you're not winning,
that's right,
and now the smells come forward. And so Tex was getting frustrated with Tom and the coaching staff and wanted to make some changes. So after that 88 season, Tex leaned on Tom and wanted to bring in a different defensive coordinator. He wanted changes in the staff. So what happened was we hired Ernie Stoutner, retired. We hired George Hill, defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. He was our new defensive coordinator. And but in exchange for that, Tom wanted to get rid of Paul Hackett, who Tex had arranged to hire 2 years before that, bringing the West Coast out of the Bill Walsh offense from the 49ers.
Right.
And Tom didn't like it. He referred to it once privately as junk passing, which actually was perfect for Danny White, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's right. It was.
So Hackett is reassigned to special assistant or something, which means he's not doing anything, and hired Jerry Rome as the offensive coordinator. So we made this big announcement of these changes in I guess it was early January, after the season. Well, that got blown out of the water a few weeks later when Jerry Jones rode into town.
Right. Everybody forgot about all those staff changes.
There was conflict, between Tex and Tom.
Yeah.
And it was in the process of being worked out, but then, Jerry came in and everybody was out.
Yeah.
But so back to the story. So how I wound up at the league office, as I said, I had no aspirations to do that. And the way it worked out was, Jerry came in and basically lopped off the senior staff.
Mm-hmm.
So now I move up. I'm still in my mid-30s. And so I go through the 89 season with them. And I was on board, and I like Jimmy, and you could feel, even though we went 1-15, you could feel some good things happening.
Yeah.
And so I was all set. But Paul Tagliabue Pete Rozelle retired in 89, and Paul Tagliabue became commissioner, and he made some changes in the league office. So all of a sudden, early in 1990, I get approached by the league office people, including I become friends with a young guy in the league office named Roger Goodell.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was part of it, recruiting me up there. And they came and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming up here and being league spokesman and, running the PR department, et cetera?"
Yeah.
And they said, so I was back where I was in 79. Oh, what do I do now?
I'm back home, starting
No,
over
I wasn't
again.
looking to go home.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking to work for the league office, but wow, this is it was an attractive opportunity, and I wasn't sure what to do. And I'd been through the first year under the new regime, Jerry and Jimmy, but there was still some uncertainty.
Yeah, sure.
Are they going to really want me because I was part of the old regime? I don't know what's going to.
Mm-hmm.
There was uncertainty, so. Again, I went back and forth in my head and talking to people, and then I decided to do it.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a great thing there, that it felt like you were going back to 1979 all over again, and you're trying to have to make that decision. Only you're in your 30s at this particular time. Yeah. But do you find that I mean, we've all been through those career decisions that you finally just decide, I got to take this chance. It looks like a good opportunity. I got to believe in myself and believe in the people who do believe in me. and then just go for it. Is that the attitude you had to take?
Yeah, that's exactly. You take a leap of faith,
Yeah.
and at that point, I was mobile. I wasn't married, didn't have kids, so it was easy for me to do that.
Yeah.
Easier than if I had a family and it's a different situation. So I just decided to do it. I remember jokingly when I first came up here, I said I didn't have a car, I didn't have a house, I didn't have a wife, I didn't have a kid, I didn't have any pets. All I had was a job.
You'll be perfect for this.
But it was a all-consuming job. In fact, that's the word that Tex Schramm once said about about our world that we live in, working for the NFL and working for the Cowboys. He said it consumes you, and so that was accurate. But it was very exciting because it was the new commissionership with Paul Tagliabue, who was a brilliant guy and a really great guy, and we were going through so many changes, getting a labor deal, getting stadiums built, expansion, this, that. There were so many issues we were dealing with that it kept me busy, that's for sure, and it made the time pass. And this was before we had email and text and all that.
Right. It
used to be a
social
pile of
media
messages. This one called, that one called, that one called. My God, I don't know how we did it.
Well,
I don't know how we got anywhere without GPS.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, when you get to New York and start working with the NFL, obviously much different topics, much different things that you need to deal with every day than from the club level, from the team level. What was that transition like? Because you said now you've got labor negotiations and stadiums to build and just league operations. How different was that?
There were all kinds of controversies with players, owners, this and that. It was, it was being a defensive coordinator in a sense. We're on defense a lot because I'm responding to the media. They need this, they want that, and a lot of it was not pleasant because they were difficult, controversial issues, and we just had to manage them. So that whole thing about being emotionally invested with the team and when you win, and that was gone.
Yeah.
So in reflecting on it, the Cowboys was more quote unquote fun. The league office was more challenging and rewarding in that sense, dealing with some of these issues. And then when we had good outcomes, like getting the labor agreement, which is basically the same structure that's still in place 30 years later. Mm-hmm. And some of the other good things that happened, it was very rewarding. And it was, it was working with good people, Joe Brown and Paul Tagliabue, Roger Goodell, et cetera, Jim Steig, all the people at the league office that we worked with at that time. And then, and it was also a lot of fun to get to know coaches, owners at the league meetings we went to and things we had to do with them. It was a heady time. It was really interesting. We went through a lot of changes and ushered in a transformative era for the NFL. And it's continued to grow. It's amazing to see what's been accomplished.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. For so long, I mean, you go way back into the 50s and really maybe even the 60s when baseball was considered America's national pastime, but the NFL's enormous growth and branding and marketing capability, which a lot of that was attributed to Tex and to other people as well, to grow this league. But you were a part of a long time steep upward growth of the league, and that had to be exciting, I guess, to see the league grow.
Absolutely. We had the Harris poll. I think it was 1965 was the first. Harris poll used to do a poll every year on the most popular sport among fans. Mm-hmm. And 1965 was the first time NFL pro football surpassed baseball.
Yeah.
And it just continued. The gap grew from there. And now it's not even close. Yeah. And so it was and technology, yeah, there were great leaders and people, talented people involved at all levels. But the technology that television brought in and continued to enhance and make the game so attractive as a television property, that was certainly instrumental. It was the perfect sport for television and continues to be for a lot of reasons, including that it's essentially once a week, although now it
Yeah.
seems like every night. But that's another issue.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was really exciting to be part of that growth.
When you look back,
About the first year
yeah.
when we got the new labor agreement, the first year the salary cap was 94. The salary cap was 34 per team, 34.6 million.
Wow.
And what is it now? 300 million or
Yeah,
something?
it's 10 times that.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's,
When you
and it's great for players
it
and
is.
in the whole league. The players, they get essentially half of it, and they should.
Mm-hmm. When you look back, Greg, on man, all these years with the Cowboys and when you're with the NFL, and now you're getting to enjoy a little bit of life, if you will. What do you take away from it that you can if you had somebody that was trying to follow in your footsteps and say, "Wow, what a career that was." What would you give them as advice to say, do this or stick to that or connect to these people or take this journey, take this path?
Yeah, it's just there's no real secret to it, but you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself out there and take chances like calling someone. Now
Yeah.
it's emailing and there's ways you can look at all kinds of jobs that might be available, and take advantage of whatever contacts you have that in the business. Don't be afraid to speak to them, like I did with that fellow at the league office. Hey, if you ever hear of anything.
Yeah.
So a lot of things you have to get used to. You're going to get turned down, and a lot of things aren't going to work out. But all you need is one thing.
Mm.
For example, our youngest daughter, we have three
Yeah.
kids, two girls and a boy. Our youngest graduated from Syracuse, the communication school, Newhouse School, last May. So she moved down to Washington, D.C. with her boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and she's the only one of our kids who has any real interest in working in the business of sports.
Yeah.
She's a big fan, and so she looked at opportunities with the Commanders, and I said, well, the guy, the head of PR for the Washington Commanders is the grandson of Ed Kroke, the Giants PR director when I was
Wow.
in the team, and who said good things to Doug Todd. I said, and I'd met him. His name is Sean DiBarbieri. He's outstanding. And I said, but I'm not going to contact him. You contact him and tell him who you are and see if there's anything.
Yeah.
So I was proud of her because she said, okay. She didn't say, oh, can't you contact him? And she didn't do that. And she contacted him, and he offered her an opportunity to work on their game day staff.
Outstanding.
And she did, and she loved it. And but again, the point is, I had a leader there, but
Yeah.
she put herself out there, contacted somebody who knew me,
Yeah.
and it led to at least a part-time thing with the Commanders. She wound up at a Monday night game introducing herself to Troy Aikman.
Yeah.
Who was talking to up in the booth before the game, and she was waiting because he was talking to, she said, some guy. And so then finally there was a break, and she went over and introduced herself to Troy, who then introduced her to the guy who was Josh Harris, the owner.
Oh, some guy.
And then she also introduced herself to Jerry Jones when the Cowboys went in there, and I think it was December.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very nice to her. And but those are the kind of things you need to do. And that's what I would advise. Like I advise our daughter, I would advise other people. You just got to put yourself out there and network and try to create your own opportunities.
One final question, I'm going to let you go. Do you think, well, Dallas Cowboys had a unique situation with Tex Schramm, Tom Landry, and Gil Brandt, three key people for 30 years, basically, in that. Will we ever see anything like that again, you think, in running an organization?
Well, I think the Patriots came close with Kraft and Belichick and Brady.
Yeah.
But yeah, you never know. You may. The fact that we can even point to that recent years says that, I mean, it was unique, unusual at that time that the Cowboys had.
Yeah.
So hard to replicate, but it would take a unique set of circumstances to have people do that for that long, work together. It's hard.
It is hard.
And as I mentioned before that story, it started unraveling at the end when the losses piled up.
Right. Winning, as you said, is a great deodorant.
John Madden.
Yeah, it's from John Madden. Greg, you've an incredible impact on the industry and public relations, communications with the Cowboys nationally, with the NFL. I think people, I certainly looked up to you when I was coming up in the media, and a lot of people still do. But keep doing what you're doing, and I appreciate you jumping on the show today.
Absolutely, Brian. Thank you, and enjoyed it, and continued success.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Built for This. Be sure to follow Built for This on your favorite listening platform and share it with a friend. Join me on the next episode when I will share entertaining stories of inspiration, encouragement, and purpose-driven experiences. What are you built for? Built for This is produced and recorded by Heart Media DFW.